the first era of AI was about building intelligence. The second is controlling it, routing, governance, security, private evals.
What people didn't realize was that these things can reason. And that's to take 10 vulnerabilities that might have been on the backlog and you staple them together and create an attack path. When you create an attack path and these things can reason, I mean, that's crazy.
We're seeing like the industrialization of vulnerability discovery and exploitation with AI.
I think the biggest heist ever happening right now is that OpenAI and Anthropic created their own forward deployed engineering companies. What do you think they're gonna do? They're gonna forward deployed engineer into your company. They're gonna build your workflows. I don't fucking want that, right? Ultimately, Chris, you and I both know that where this world is going to is a world of outcomes. Like, they're just cut to the chase. We can talk about tech all we want, but it's like the only way you can keep up with it is that agents fix all these problems.
That is like a brand new security problem. Like, who's building for that?
Like, thinking about Anthropic, there were AI people that created the security stuff. Like, I mean, there are rumors that they actually run themselves autonomously in there. So, like, you gotta think so fucking crazy.
Thank you for joining the Resilient Cyber Show. My name is Chris Hughes, and today I'm joined by Ed Sim from Boldstart Ventures. Ed, thanks for being here.
Hey, man, thanks for having me on. I think this is our second time, so thanks.
Yeah, it was about a year ago, roughly at this time, I think. Not exactly, but, it's been a little bit of time. But for folks that don't follow you on LinkedIn, don't follow your newsletter, don't follow your investments and so on, tell us a bit about yourself and the team.
Yeah, so I've been investing in the very first kind of rounds of companies. I call that inception investing since, I guess, 30 years now. And so I invest in AI infrastructure, cybersecurity, and physical AI. So my investment kind of thesis kind of spans the gamut of hardcore technology, right? And so cyber-wise, we've been the very first investor. The boards of companies like Protect AI sold to Palo Alto. We did that like a year before ChatGPT even came out, so we can talk about that. And then newer ones are like Keycard, which is building kind of agent authentication authorization. Surf AI, which just closed a new round with Excel, and we did that with CyberStarts at the beginning, and a bunch of others. So really, really excited to be here.
Yeah, I was telling you off air before we jumped on, I read a lot of your content because, I live in a cybersecurity echo chamber. Like, everyone's all things cybersecurity. And it's nice to step out and see the broader, CTO, CIO, investor perspective, and I watch the market and security in terms of startups and venture capital and all that. And you have some great resources around there. So you made this point that you've been investing for almost 30 years. I wanted to start, I'm going to hit on all the things you just brought up, sneak, protect, surf, et cetera. But, in this era where a founder can vibe code MVPs, and like, what does a day one partnership look like anymore compared to maybe eras past before like agentic coding and things like that kind of were mainstream?
Yeah, no, I think that's a great question. We were just talking about this earlier. Look, at the end of the day, it's amazing. Anyone can create anything, right? And so I think it's the best time to be a founder and to build. On the other hand, in the years past, when you had an idea 10 years ago, 15 years ago, you'd build this software company, you figure, oh, gee, maybe my moat is 6 months, 12 months, maybe 18 months, right? But now things can get copied very, very fast. So when we look at founders at inception, there are a couple ways to make money in cybersecurity. One is take something that already exists and reinvent it and make it 10 times better, right? And which is getting harder and harder, but you're seeing a lot of people do that who are second and third time founders, perhaps raising $100 million, some massive rounds of funding, and say, I'm going to do this AI native or agent native, right? And the other is to go after new attack paths and new attack vectors. But the risk there is that the market's very early, there's probably no budget for it. But if things do take off, like a Protect AI, we funded that a year before ChatGPT took off. We were there at the right time at the right place, made the right acquisitions, and were able to exit for over $700 million to Palo. In today's world, though, what we look at is, because I got to tell you, the world doesn't need all the cybersecurity companies. The world needs more cybersecurity, but we don't need all the cybersecurity companies that we have right now. Just flat out. And I think the biggest challenge is that people can have a great cyber idea, but what I really look for underneath that is the depth on the AI strengths, right? So vibe coding, it's not about vibe coding. I want to know kind of, guys, like, are you going to build your own model? Are you going to post-train your own model? Like, how deep are you going to go in terms of kind of building a moat and building a flywheel? And how deep are you going to go into those customer environments, right? So I like to know that you can actually hire some hardcore AI folks, like researchers, et cetera, as well. Like Surf AI's got a massive team of researchers they've accumulated together. So that's something that's very big for us. And then you look at what lens, am I going to reinvent something, or am I looking at a new attack vector, right? So that's how we think about it.
Yeah, you brought up, Protect. I wanted to ask you about that acquisition of Palo Alto, obviously, like, kind of very, very early, as you said, before even ChatGPT. I think you called it the first exit in AI security history. Like, and there's a lot of, to your comment about we don't need all the cybersecurity companies, there are a ton of cybersecurity companies. And I can tell you as a practitioner, like, a lot of times for security leaders, CISOs is spent just navigating like, what are all these products? How do I consolidate? How do I get ROI? Like, how do I kind of rationalize my tech stack? When should an AI security founder, looking at the founder's perspective, sell into a consolidator versus keep building towards being the bigger standalone platform? How do you think about that?
Yeah, I think at every point in time when a founder is out there raising capital, it's also a perspective of, gee, maybe I should consider, like, do I take $50, $100 million more at a higher price where my pref stack goes higher, where the new round investor thinks I should get a 2x on top of 700 million. So now I have to sell for 1.5 billion. Or do I kind of consider like, gee, my last round was done at 400 million, and then I can make everyone, a fair amount of return back right now. And actually I can probably do myself a better bit. And I think every decision is kind of independent. It's independent of who the founder is. It's also dependent on kind of where the market is, right? For example, in Protect's case, we were out there, we're cranking along, having a number of new enterprise customers, but we also felt there are a number of competitors coming down the pike, and a lot of them weren't as good as what we did, but it just slows things down. And the more we talked to Palo, and then Palo's like, look, we're going to get in this space no matter what, whether it's you or someone else. So you start doing the math, and we're like, gee, at that price, everyone's going to do really well. And frankly, if you look at it, a lot of times the first one is usually the highest one, and then eventually everything else is lower after that. And then maybe after that, when the market matures, and that's kind of the first 3 years, is like the first one's the highest, and then people are just buying the tech, which they did. It started a wave of 12 or 15 acquisitions. But then once you start seeing who the leaders are, what real revenue comes in, then they kind of value it based on revenue. And then the numbers make it higher, right, if the market is real. And so that was kind of it for us, was like looking at that situation, and the founders were like, look, this is probably the best thing we can do. And they are killing it in there, honestly. I don't know if you see or hear, but they're selling the crap out of that software.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many things we can do a whole episode on that topic alone. Is like, to your point, in the beginning, it's kind of like, you're going to be the benchmark for subsequent acquisitions in that space. And like, until revenues kind of normalize and start to become transparent. And then, obviously folks like Lee made a lot of money. Some of the early employees there, I mean, the whole firm was early at that point. And then also, like, having been on the product vendor side, you're going to be facing Palo, whether it's with them or against them. And it's going to cause a lot of friction within your sales cycles, in big enterprises and so on. And they have that massive distribution. They have the brand recognition. Like, they have all these things that you're going to be facing in these deals when you go out there. So it made a lot of sense if you think about it from that perspective as you framed it. I wanted to ask you too, like, you talk about being an inception fund, and we've seen some of the. You talked about this in the opening, like some of these insane, round sizes, even seed rounds, and so on. Like, how do you think about competing in this space as an inception fund, against some of the mega funds out there, with these unheard of kind of seed rounds and so on that are going on?
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. I was looking at some stat from Carta where the 99th percentile of these seed rounds are like,
I saw that this week too.
Yeah. Was it 250 million or something, or 500 million? I mean, the valuations were insane. And look, from our perspective, a couple of things. One is, I always believe there's going to be an opportunity for people to be first and to be kind of courageous and to have the conviction with the founder. And just the way we've done things, we feel very comfortable. I've been doing this for 30 years. Boldstart's been doing this since 2010. We can look a founder in the eye. We can diligence who they are. They may have nothing, but we can just understand kind of that, these people have grit, that they're going to build something. They have a unique insight that has been built over 10 years. And we've seen enough things where we can actually commit quicker than most funds. And I got to tell you, like, when you do that, the goodwill you build with the founder, they will never, you are my first kind of person that just said, I'm in. And a lot of times what we'll do is we'll catalyst. I call that ball control. In any sport you play, you want to have ball control. So ball control for us is moving as fast as possible. If it requires 48 hours on the weekend for us to do our diligence and make calls. But what the most interesting thing is, because we do what we do, I mean, look, about a third of our investments are in cyber. The founders come to us and they've already diligenced us. They already know who we are. And so, and they probably diligence us faster than we can diligence them. So there's already this kind of wanting to work together. It probably got referred to another founder. So the credentials are kind of there. Look, we invest in people. We want high slipping people that can come in and tell a good story, but then also can build the foundation of, a big idea, right? A big idea, but maybe it starts as a wedge and they grow over time. So anyway, I think that's that. And then two is we have upsized our funds. I mean, like, we can, write checks in the 15, I could split a $30 million round with a big fund, which we have. We did a $25 million round. We split with GV kind of in Tesla, which was Guy Pajarni from Sneaks Company. So we can regularly do that, but then also we can write smaller checks too, because we're not so big that $1 million, $2 million, $3 million check is not going to matter to us because it does. And so that's kind of the balance that we strike.
Yeah, that makes sense. And honestly, it's funny you brought up Tesla. I've watched a ton of guys' content, and like they're doing amazing work already on their new initiative and new venture. And I feel like they're building on the momentum of Sneak and the developer-centric type approach, but now with the new Agentic SDLC and all that. Like I watch a lot of the stuff that he's doing, and I think they're going to do incredibly well too. I just want to dig a little deeper on something you said there for a moment ago. Was like the founders diligencing you as well. Like typically it's like you're doing due diligence on the founders, right, to make a bet with placing funds and so on. What do you think founders look for in a venture partner that kind of helps differentiate who they select as well?
I think first and foremost is this a guy, a man or woman or a partner that I'm going to want to call, at midnight or take a call at midnight? Do I like them? Right. I mean, because everyone's money is green, and most of the investments that we make will be competitive, right? There'll be multiple term sheets on the line, and first you got to and same with us. So do I like working with this person? Sometimes maybe that just a fit's not there, right? And so if there's a fit, that actually kind of, because look, I think the average venture deal lasts longer than the average marriage out there, which is kind of crazy, right? So I think people underestimate how important the people aspect are. And then all the other things come after that. Yeah, same amount of money, that's fine. Valuation is all within a band. That's not kind of less important. And then it's kind of, what are you going to do for me? When you do inception investing, I tell you, Chris, you can't put a lens of a multi-stage firm on an inception investment because, because people sometimes worry about how quickly do you get to revenue and how quickly do you scale. Maybe you need to spend that extra 3 months saying, I should build this thing and make it a little bit deeper technically, or if I spend this extra time. And so having that patience, I think, is really important. Knowing when to get out of the way and not bother them, right? Because I've seen kind of investors just kind of always hover over people. It's like, look, go build. If I'm here to help you build, that's the wrong investor, right? Because I'm investing in you to build something. And then two is, of course, the added value. Can you open relationships to the right CISOs or the right kind of IT executives, and can you actually help me hire people, right? Because a lot of times I spend time interviewing, let's say heads of sales or heads of marketing or heads of engineering, just sharing the patterns that we had before. And I'm not the final say, but they like to have kind of our word. And of course, you end up trying to sell them too. Like, hey, I've backed multiple companies. This one's going to be a massive one. And therefore you join. So those are things that we like to do. But I think that kind of is the most important thing. Is that relationship. And people forget that in the world of AI.
No, I loved hearing that part. That's why I want to dig deeper in it. It's like not all capital is created equally. Like there's dollars, but there's the relationship, there's the people, there's the experience of having been there and done this before and help companies succeed. There's the CISO network and the access to the buyers and the distribution opportunities as well that people don't think about. I do want to pivot us to something you and I were riffing on a little bit off air. Is like, a big thesis around neoclouds and self-hosting and open source and control of proprietary data and intelligence, et cetera. Like, there's a big core argument you've been making lately, I think, where the first era of AI was about building intelligence. The second is controlling it, routing, governance, security, private evals. If intelligence is becoming a commodity, like where in the control era are the venture scale companies? How do you think about it?
Well, look, I think the best thing that ever happened to any software company is that Anthropic and OpenAI filed to go public. And the reason is because, they're like, holy crap, I actually have to start maybe not subsidizing my margins as much. Right. And all of a sudden there's a wake up call in the world saying, you know what, man, the tokenomics, the cost of actually using all these models just kind of, we blew through our budgets. And you could hear kind of people talking about it repeatedly. Right. So that was part one. Part two was then like, okay, if I'm doing that, then maybe I can actually staple together models that I don't need to use state-of-the-art or SOTA models all the time for everything. Right. So then this whole router kind of industry got created. Right. So even look, some of the largest banks I know were already building kind of models where they would actually do a query and it would automatically route, maybe if it was a very important question, to state of the art. And then they would have sub-agents underneath kind of managing kind of Kimi or DeepSeek or GLM 5.2 or whatever, right? So then you kind of, now this whole industry is spawning around that. I mean, Spectre Cloud does some of that as well. And they're going to have a big announcement in a week or two about this. But so now, and then the other thing I think is that people are proving that if you post-train models, right, take an open source model, add some more data to it, do some more reinforcement learning around it by creating the right rewards for certain kind of outcomes. In security, that's a really interesting area, right? For example, it's like if I find this vulnerability and then I can daisy chain multiple vulnerabilities together and turn that into a real hack, right? Kind of a path. If I create a patch, does that work, right? Like in code, code works. And in security also, if you patch something, you can know that works, right? So there's reinforcement learning and reward feedback getting very interesting. So I'm seeing more and more people now saying, okay, like now it costs a lot. I can do routing. And then, holy shit, why am I giving my data over to all these, vendors? Why am I giving it to OpenAI and Anthropic? Like, I think the biggest heist ever happening right now is that OpenAI and Anthropic created their own forward deployed engineering companies. What do you think they're going to do? They're going to forward deployed engineer into your company. They're going to build your workflows, and they're going to take your data and then use that to sell to every other competitor. I don't fucking want that, right? And so I think that's another thing. So Satya keeps talking about, which he's a brilliant master. So it's not only the data guys, but that data also includes how your company works. Like Chris, if you and I had the same company, how your company works and how my company works may be different. Okay. And the second thing is what people don't understand is that people don't give a shit about benchmarks, right? There's benchmarks for coding. Those are generic benchmarks. But how about benchmark for Chris's company, benchmark for Ed's company? So if you benchmark for my company, I want to make sure that I own those workflows and I own those benchmarks and you own your benchmarks. You shouldn't have your benchmarks. Maybe you operate better than me. You should not be giving that to me. So that's the kind of thing that Satya is talking about. And of course, he's talking his own book, right? Because he doesn't have a model. He doesn't have a game in the hunt. But the reality of it is, it's true, right? And now Alex Karp's beyond it. He's talking his own book. But the reality of it is, it's true. Right? And
those two.
That's it.
Yeah, no, those
I
two.
can go on and on. I'm very passionate about this. We've invested in 6 or 7 domain-specific models over the last 2 or 3 years. So this is an area we've been investing behind, big time, right? We've got generalist AI in the robotics space that just closed at $2 billion. We've got Topos Bio in the bio AI space. We have ur.ai, which allows you to build your own personalized AI, which you should try because it could actually read your newsletter and create literally a video of you talking about it. Right?
I saw that recently.
Yeah, and we've got one doing mining for minerals, and I've got a few more coming down the pike. So anyway,
that's super exciting. Yeah, no, I mean, just Alex Karp and obviously Satya and others have been kind of beating that drum recently. And as you said, of course, it's in their own interest and they're incentivized to kind of have this narrative, but it's also true. And people were kind of having this reverse backlash against the token maxing that went on, and now the subsidy era is coming to an end. But for me on the security side, this opens up so many. I don't want to necessarily say exciting, but it is exciting security conversations around the model hosting, the security of hosting the models, the lineage, the training, all the security aspects that go into kind of engineering, hosting, training, and utilizing these things in your own environments too, versus using the frontier labs. Like when you look at this, and it's like Satya had that line where like the company's private evals become the most valuable IP, like their own data and so on. Like if evals, context, and memory are the crown jewels, that I look to that as like a brand new security problem. Like who's building for that, or how do you look at that landscape? Because there's going to be a lot of exciting opportunities, both for the builders and also obviously for the folks investing in them on your end.
Yeah. So I guess a couple of things. What's really funny is I kind of like say that everything we did at RSA this year was useless because a week after that, Mythos rumors came out, and then weeks after that, Mythos came out. When you talk to people that use Mythos, they say, holy shit, this stuff is really, really good. But it's not so good that you couldn't specifically take an open source harness and just say, let's actually build around it. But it's really fucking good and it's good for people. And guess what? Most enterprises and most security people don't have the AI people and the talent to actually go build these things. So that's part one. Part two is then the question is, there used to be a backlog of 1,000 vulnerabilities perhaps. And maybe you always prioritize the top 10 or the top 20 based on kind of, mission critical systems. But what people didn't realize was that these things can reason. I mean, and that's to take 10 vulnerabilities that might have been on the backlog and you staple them together and create an attack path. When you create an attack path and these things can reason, that's crazy. And then people say IBM, let's talk about the IBM warning. It dropped 25% and people are saying that it was a software thing. It was, blah, blah, blah. But in a comment was also people are worried about security spend. And what they're worried about is how much budget am I going to have to spend? Because if you said to people, can I use Mythos all the time to continuously operate, ingest code, ingest my cloud configurations, my identities, my endpoints, and network state? You'd say, yes, I would do that all the time. But guess what? People's budgets were fucking blowing up, absolutely blowing up. And so then the question is how do I actually do continuous attack path reasoning on a protective side? How do I do that? So I think there's going to be a whole bunch of different companies that get spawned to perhaps partner with the Mythos or a Daybreak from OpenAI and also give the ability to do, I guess, frontier-like security at 1/10 the cost or more, right? Because you got to balance it. I mean, if I said to you, hey, I can save you 90% on your security, you're going to be like, I would only spend that if I get the best security ever, right? So that's one area you just can't mess around with. So this is going to be very, very interesting. It's going to change. And I bet you, and I look at my existing portfolio, I've got a lot of portfolio companies right now already in security that are talking about deploying in virtual environments or on-prem, kind of very domain-specific models. It could be vulnerability models or reasoning models or code models directly on-prem for these companies, because it's easier to do, it's easier to build, and if you have the talent, why wouldn't the enterprise take this privacy and this data and evals built for them? So that's what's going to happen. There's going to be a ton of companies trying to build this stuff.
Yeah, no, I mean, honestly, like, just a few things I want to say on my end. Like, this is why I enjoy your content, is like, you're not in the security space. And like, I wrote a book on vulnerability management previously. I've been doing that throughout my career. It's called
I would love to hear your perspective, man.
Everything you said there. And I've had people on the show in the past, like, who are deep in the weeds on this. And like, they say we have Mythos at home with open weight, smaller, models. We can use effective harness engineering to find, 0 days and end days and so on. And then the vulnerability chaining piece is incredibly valid, because historically we always patch what are considered critical or high vulnerabilities, like based on severity scores, and we kind of ignore the mediums and lows. But if you can chain together several mediums and lows with these models, exploitation looks much more different now. So we're seeing like the industrialization of vulnerability discovery and exploitation with AI, and it's going to really change the paradigm here. And then like the whole ecosystem that we use to kind of manage this, like vulnerability databases like NIST, and I'm going way down the geek on the security side.
CV
but those are all
things,
starting to crumble under this volume that's happening of vulnerabilities that are being reported and discovered and so on.
Can I ask you a question? Like, how do you feel about, like if I said, here's Fable or Mythos for you at your enterprise, and said, okay, by the way, the only way this really works, because the other thing about these companies is that they find vulnerabilities. Maybe they can look at the attack path reasoning around it and kind of see kind of how these paths are created. But how much access you can give it to have it understand your domain and your environment, to know every single endpoint, to know every single device, to know every single person, right? I think that's a really troublesome aspect if you feed that to one of the state-of-the-art models, right? I mean, I'm just asking you, like,
it's a perfectly valid question. Like we kind of touched on it from the business, intellectual property, competitive dynamic aspect. But if you think about it from the security side, you're now turning over all this sensitive data about your environments, your vulnerabilities, your systems, how they interconnect and communicate to a third party. And now it's a supply chain risk as well, because you're hopefully trusting that Anthropic and OpenAI and others safeguard this data and they don't get exposed in some way, because it could be used by a malicious actor down the road against you, that you've kind of just given the keys of the kingdom of a map of your attack surface to a third party, basically.
Which is why I think you're going to go to a point back to earlier, the conversation you brought up about Satya, is that people are going to put on their own on-prem environment. They're going to have perhaps kind of context memory of their own on-prem environment that they own. I mean, right now, as far as I know, Google is probably one of the only frontier lab models, if you call them frontier, but models out there that actually create a VPC for you already, right? I mean, that's already been announced, and so you have that, and let's just say you have that model, which is generalized intelligence, but then it's tuned to your thing and you kind of own it in your cloud. But like, you have to kind of have that, right? Because ultimately, Chris, you and I both know that where this world is going to is a world of outcomes. Like, they're just cut to the chase. We can talk about tech all we want, but it's like the only way you can keep up with it is that agents fix all these problems, and you have the trust in the agent to have the understanding of your environment, which you kind of have to have maybe something on-prem. Maybe you have access to frontier intelligence on the SOTA side, so it's pinging off both sides, and then agents have to fix these things automatically. Period. And that's kind of where we see the world going, right? I have a company called Joon, JOON.co, and it's founded by Alon Cohen, who was the former CTO and co-founder of Samplify. So he helped invent SOAR back in the day. And he calls it just the autonomous workforce is kind of trained here to defend your environment. And literally he has Helen, Valerie, Dawn, Joey, who are these very specific experts that are brought in to augment teams. And let's just say you have 10 people in your team, but you need 4 more. Well, we'll sell you 4 people and they'll do the work for you. And that's kind of what we're doing, is outcome-based. And that's where the world has to go, almost like support.
All right, I'm going to go on one last little rant, and I'm going to move us on to another topic.
Anyway, this is a rant. I could go on and on.
No, I love it. This is amazing. So, last year there was a lot of excitement around what was called services as a software, right? The ability to use software agents and so on to kind of conduct labor and do activities. And this is what we need within cybersecurity, is to use AI and agents and so on as a force multiplier for cybersecurity, because we've always had workforce constraints that we're always outnumbered by engineers, developers, et cetera. We can't keep up with the threat landscape. So using this technology as a force multiplier is the right direction to go, and I'm super excited about it. But of course, it's dual use. It can be used against you as well. So that it's kind of like a dual use technology in that way from a cyber perspective. I did want to ask you about, you brought up Keycard earlier. So Agentic IAM has got tremendous amount of attention lately, both in investment from the cybersecurity community. We're kind of starting to introduce new protocols like agent auth and things to kind of, how do we kind of govern and control how agents communicate, authenticate, et cetera. Like with Keycard, you've said that we need to stop thinking about agents as digital twins and start thinking of thousands of short-lived problem solvers. Like permissions can't last forever. So how do you think of it from the investment perspective? Do you think agent identity is a standalone category, or do you think it'll be absorbed by Okta and or Microsoft, or like how do you see that one playing out when it comes to consolidation and vendors and things like that within the landscape?
I would say yes, and no, right? All across the board, right? So look, I funded these guys 2 years ago. Us and Andreessen were the first ones in. I had known the founder, Ian Livingstone, since he was an engineer at one of my first companies that was sold to Salesforce. And I backed him again after that in a new company in Krieger. And then Jared Hansen, who's the chief architect of Alt0. So they had Sneak, Alt0, and a bunch of other real high-level experience. And I'd seen a number of things that were doing NHI level dashboarding stuff, but I'm a nerd, right? You can tell. And I love kind of underlying security primitives. And Jared actually built Passport.js and a bunch of other hardcore techs. And what they'd said was like, hey guys, like this is going to take a little bit longer because the infrastructure is going to be really hard to do, but we're going to take a fundamentally different approach. Versus kind of showing you all the non-human identities kind of working, let's talk about the problem itself. If you believe that every agent should have its own identity, that it shouldn't go through Chris or Ed, that, number one, if you believe they should be dynamic access or authorization, finely scoped, if you believe that they should be ephemeral and dynamic, right, when a job is done, and you believe that there should be an audit trail, and then if you can cryptographically prove that the agent is not hacked in the whole process, that's what we're building. And so this company was coming fundamentally from the bottom up. And it's like, okay, we want to go to the builders. We want to go to people building kind of agents to kind of help them kind of do this. Two is over time, just like Protect, what they realized was that they needed to expand their footprint. So we made a few acquisitions. We made 2 or 3 acquisitions through VC. So we actually have stuff, for example, that can plug into Claude Code immediately. You can control blast radius around that. You can create rules like never push code into production. And you're like, why doesn't Anthropic do that? Well, because we talked about earlier, we're going to live in a multi-model world. So you write one kind of governance layer that sits on top of Daybreak, and people switch all the time from Daybreak to, from Codex to Anthropic. So we've added a whole bunch of periphery things to just kind of get in the door, even though they may not sound like they're ancillary. And now we're part of this enterprise architecture stack. All right, so let's fast forward. That's kind of the primitive. So I'll give you an example. We talked to a bank, and we've been selected from one of the large banks. And they're like, dude, we met with 88 agent companies. And you were down to the final 2, and we picked you. And we picked you because you understand the enterprise architecture that's required for us to pick one vendor that can actually manage all this stuff and think about it holistically versus these 5 different point solutions we need to put together. And that's kind of what Protect did. We bought 4 or 5 companies. And so I believe, in my opinion, that the agent identity market is going to be fucking massive. I think that a lot of large vendors will win. But I also think companies like Keycard, we're not the only one. There'll be There'll be a few others that actually think about it holistically. Where if I said I want an agent identity, it can't be just one little point product. It has to be a number of different things. So that's why I said yes, and no, meaning that there's going to be consolidation. We've already consolidated some companies within our own agent space, and now we have this enterprise architecture that we're selling, and then we also have a dev motion now where devs can easily just kind of sign up and build for it right now. So. Yeah. I think it's going to be massive. We need, this problem has to be solved, and it's going to be solved in many different ways, but we don't need 100 vendors to do it. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think you're spot on. Like, of course, there's going to be some cycles of like innovative incumbents winning, but also new entrants kind of disrupting and winning in the category. And I want to say a few things about Keycard. I actually follow an individual named Ali Howe who has a podcast called Insecure Agents.
She's a beast.
That's my go-to listen because
I love it.
Keycard is bringing together like these industry leaders like Carl McGinnis, former chief architect of Okta, Dick Hart, who wrote OAuth, like all these experts in the domain around agentic identity. And I'm always following their content from Keycard because I'm learning around agentic IAM. So like they're not only making a product, but they're bringing the right people together to have the conversation about where the industry is going. How do we build for this? Like what do the protocols look like? So if you're not following Insecure Agents and Keycard's content, definitely go give that a follow. I learn a lot from it.
Chris, I love that you're saying that, right? Because remember I said earlier about what we look for in founders. founders, right? What is unique insight from what you're building? Kind of which security lens you're doing, right? Are you 10xing something or going after a new category? And then 3 is technical moat. And then 4 is how do you think about distribution and marketing, right? And so that was a very intentional thing. They bought kind of insecure agents because they're like, this woman just knows how to kind of build an audience, and she has all the key leaders here. And by the way, the reason they did that is she's fantastic. She's super smart, but it's also the market is still really early. Despite all the stuff that you and I talk about and everyone that listens on it, the amount of agents deployed right now is probably like 3 or 4% in production. So we're at the tip of the iceberg right now in terms of the opportunity. So
yeah, it's huge.
Anyway, so I think that's great, right?
No, I think that's a good thing to call out is like there's a technical aspect, there's the market, all these kind of things, but there's also the brand and the community and like bringing people together, having those conversations, building trust of being a trusted source of information in the domain. And, like,
it's not Keycard, it's insecure agents, right?
Correct,
it's not the other thing, right? That's what's important. And and they learned that from Sneak, by the way, because we when we were at Sneak, we did the secure developer. And
I've long followed that podcast, and now I'm following Tesla's new content.
Exactly. So there's this tried and true thing. Yeah. And by the way, and yes, you have got to go talk to the CISOs and do that thing. We all know how that worked. But then there's also another mechanism, which I think people should understand, and I hope some founders kind of understand, is that building the brand and building actually a community that's bigger than what you do, that's not about you, that's about kind of, look, ultimately we want to help make the world more secure when we wake up every day. If you're in it for the money, then get the hell out. But if you're in it to help make the world more secure and to solve problems, to make sure nation states don't take us down, then these are the things that I think provide goodwill. And even Ian from Protect AI, he did the same thing. He had his his podcast almost like between two ferns or between two clouds. But he knew all his competitors. They would regularly meet across the board just to kind of trade notes with each other, because they're like, look, rising tide lifts all boats. Let's make sure we kind of know each other. I'd rather know who my competitors are than not. And that's kind of the way this industry works.
Yeah, I agree with that. Just I'll say last thing for me is like, I think it's a not a zero-sum game. Like you can do well financially by also doing good for the community and bringing together folks, having good conversations, helping everyone kind of learn and up level at the same time. And that's why I love, all the outlets that we just talked about. Like I learned so much from them.
Including your podcast, dude, because now it's becoming one where my founders, some of the PR firms are like, how do I get in the so you're going to have my buddy Yair Grinlinger from Surf AI, hop on the podcast to talk about.
It's funny you mentioned Surf, because that takes me to the next question I had for you. Is like, you and others have been making the argument that with the rise of agentic AI, agents can exponentially outnumber human users, changing the dynamics of security. Like scaling agents while almost no one has the architecture to secure them quite yet. Like what does the the agentic operating model for security look like? Like the Surf AI thesis, like. What does it look like day to day? What happens to SOC analysts? What does the future of this field look like when you have firms like that?
Yeah, it really is. There's probably 85 SOC companies out there, so I think they're all great and everything. So we're not trying to do that. But what we're trying to do is that I guess there's a couple of things. Is Dimitri from Big ID had said something: you can't protect what you don't know. And what's very interesting, what Surf does is we monitor kind of all your assets. But then we tie all your assets to an individual who is the owner, right? And so we call this automated security hygiene, because if you don't know who the owner is and there's an issue that pops up, how are you going to fix it, right? And a lot of that is ping pong, as you know, ping pong on the Slack and everything else. And so what we do is we connect your systems, we kind of automatically understand what's happening, kind of what workflows look like, and then we suggest kind of automations to kind of do things. And then most importantly is we have kind of humans involved in the sense that the agent may ping a human and say, hey, I've already done the investigation for you, hit the button, let's fix this. Oh, by the way, eventually, would you like me to create an automation for that? And if you think about it, I call it like the 80-20 rule. Like a lot of the things that they can automate is kind of like, dormant accounts, just like all these things that take up a lot of time. They're annoying as hell, but there's never going to be a company for that. There's never going to be. And so if we can take all those long tail things, let's just say that long tail of 80% and kind of automate all those things, that's kind of what we're helping CISOs do right now. And then of course, what we do is we drop models on-prem, we understand your environment, we do all those things to make it really, really customized for you. So that's where it's going.
What jumped out to me from there, from the security perspective, is it goes back full circle to the point we made earlier about knowing the organizational context, right? Like, because each organization environment is unique. And then like the 80-20 kind of Pareto principle you talked about, like security technical debts like that. Like you see the iceberg tip, but there's so much more underneath that. Dormant accounts, misconfigurations, old, stale, crusty systems that are misconfigured. Like there's just a lot of stuff that needs to be addressed that's just sitting there for the taking by attackers. So
I think you nailed that. You nailed that's the most important thing is this whole context graph that we build, right? Because we suck in security is not just about security. It's about, we suck in data from identity, from the cloud, from Workday, from SaaS, from ITSM, and we add it all up together, man. That's a lot to map out, continuously understand, and we start providing suggestions for you.
Yeah, personalized to your organization, which is the key, right? Because it's not generic.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah. So I was going to, a couple last questions for you here. Like, I think this is, you have a line that you said, like, enterprise agent Hunger Games. You can't vibe code your way into production. The last mile is security compliance, determinism, and more security. We talked about this, like only 8% of organizations so far have kind of deployed agents. Like we're in the infancy phase of this. What do you think the real bottleneck is? Is it tooling, the trust, the buyers? Like, what do you think kind of, is going to help us take, to the other 92% of the untapped, market essentially when it comes to agentic deployment?
Yeah, I think a couple of things. First of all, I think when you talk to organizations, and I talked to a lot of and this is outside of security, you talk to heads of AI, CIOs. I just wrote something about this. I went to this McKinsey CTO forum with a bunch of Midwest heads of AI. You know what? Most people don't even know where to get started. Like what should I automate first to even get started? Let alone kind of, and a lot of times they'll just kind of take a cookie cutter approach to doing things, right? And I'll give you a great example. I invested in a company called X5 Labs out of Israel. It's x5labs.com. And so they drop a little download on your desktop and they understand how you work and they model it all out data. These are 37 workflows that you have. Oh, by the way, let's not just automate the 37 workflows. In fact, these are the 5 that run the most. Let's look at those 5 and say, should we even reorient these things? Can we cut out some steps in the process? Can we make it more efficient? Okay, now we've done that. Let's hit a button and let's actually create the agents for it, right? And so, oh, by the way, I'm going to drop a model on-prem. Another thing, model on-prem that you own that understands your workflow. So A is I don't know where to get started. 2 is I still think that it's just they're not sophisticated. They're just like throwing tons of tokens, right? Because most of it is just encoding. Coding actually works. It's really good, right? And so that's kind of what that. But they haven't actually done the business workflows yet. So I think we're just still very early, kind of in that process, and it's confusing as hell. Like, where do I get started? Like, if you actually look at kind of where we are right now, like what model would I start? What platform do I use? Would I do this? Which is why Palantir is almost like the easy button. I call look, there was a period of time, Chris, and I was kind of one of them where I was like, holy crap, man, Anthropic has taken over the world, right? After Claude Code, then Cowork came out, and then kind of they're just dominating, and OpenAI was nowhere to be found. But thank God, because now it just has opened up. It'd be the equivalent of like AWS will kill everyone or Google will kill everyone. And the reality of it is, because of token costs, because of kind of all these issues and privacy issues and governments getting involved, people want alternatives now. And I think we're going to hit this new phase where there's, platforms where it's easy for, it's the easy button, but it's not just Anthropic, right? It's Palantir is an easy button. It's not just Palantir. There's going to be lots of other solutions that come around. And even some of these security companies, your opportunities to build your own easy button for very specific workflows that people own, right? Like the Surf AIs of the world. And I think you're going to see a lot of that. There's probably going to be a lot of that discussion in Black Hat as well about these models.
Yeah, no, I definitely think so. And it goes to the point of what we talked about earlier, where you were saying there's so much, where do you start? There's so much confusion, so much to need to know. There's a lack of expertise. That's another reason, of course, like they're incentivized. We talked about the forward deployed engineering and kind of embedding, taking organizational context. But there are also a lens of truth to that they know the biggest barrier to adoption, implementation, entrenchment, kind of getting entrenched is helping people get started, get going, get things deployed, get things, because people don't know how to do that. It's like we're in the infancy of this adoption lifecycle. So I think that's part of it as well. And it opens up a lot of opportunities, as you said, not just for the biggest players, but for niche companies who can really understand your organizational context, your workflows, your security needs, and so on. So yeah, I think it's such an exciting time, really. And
I think the world's changed. Everything that was built, prior, if you're not kind of built for the world of eventual outcomes, right? And actually, if you're not built to understand these attack paths, not just kind of siloed kind of fixes, and this is your space, I think you're host. I think everything has to be rebuilt. So I think the opportunity for a security founder is to rebuild everything from scratch in in this format.
Yeah. And I'll wrap us up here. The thing I will say is, like, there's going to be 2 types of people, in my opinion, I could be wrong, is some people, some organizations, some individuals like us and some leaders and whomever are going to look at that and feel totally overwhelmed, paralyzed, and they're overwhelmed, right? They feel defeated. And others are going to look at that and like, holy shit, there's so much opportunity. It's so exciting. There's so much to learn. There's so much new things that we can do. And like, they're going to be invigorated by that. And I think it's going to be the latter that's going to be thriving.
I think you nailed it. I think because look, I really think that there's a lot of security professionals out there who are really smart, but like thinking about Anthropic, there were AI people that created the security stuff. Like, I mean, there are rumors that they actually run themselves autonomously in there. So like, you got to think so fucking crazy out there. Like, hey, if I can run security autonomously, I would love to do that. That would be my dream. That's why I call it the autonomous enterprise as a joke. It's like, yes, we're never going to get there, but yes, that would be the dream. So I think you really need hardcore AI people that build people that build models and all those things to come into security. And you're seeing that right now. And I think the best thing and the worst thing is the Anthropic and Daybreaker coming out there and forcing everyone else to catch up and improve their game.
Yep, well said. So I'll wrap us up there. Thanks so much again for jumping on with me, Ed. And folks that don't follow his newsletter, definitely do follow him on LinkedIn. He's got some amazing content. I'm always enjoying the insights, both inside security and beyond security. So thank you so much. I look forward to maybe running into you at Black Hat, and if not there, soon enough somewhere else.
Absolutely. I always enjoyed it, man. It was fun.
Absolutely. Take care.
Cool.